This episode is brought to you by our friends at Hover, the easiest way to buy domain names and do more with them. Get 10% off today by visiting hover.com/MrMobile.
Hi, I'm Jay Goldman, and you are watching Mr. Mobile on Butterscotch.com. Today we are going to take a look at the software that comes on Apple's iPad device. Now this runs the same operating system as the iPhone, so if you're an iPhone user, this is going to feel very familiar. There are some notable differences. Unfortunately, one of those notable differences is not multitasking. So the same as the current generation iPhone OS 3.0, there is no multitasking on this device. However, as Apple has recently announced, iPhone OS 4.0, which is coming sometime later in 2010, includes multitasking on both devices. It will be on the iPad sometime in the fall. It'll be on the iPhone a little bit earlier than that, and so when it comes out, your iPad will be able to do multitasking. So as I said, very familiar to users of the iPhone. It's got the same home screen design with a lot of icons on here. There's a dock along the bottom. One difference here is that the dock along the bottom allows you to put up to 6 icons in it, whereas on the iPhone you can only do 4, so a little bit easier to get to your frequent applications. Keyboard usage on here is obviously better than it is on an iPhone because the keyboard is bigger, and in landscape mode it feels almost the same as typing on a regular keyboard. One thing to note though, it's kind of hard to type when you're holding it in one hand and using it with the other because the screen is just big enough that 2 thumbs across is actually kind of awkward. So you'll find that if you're going to be doing a lot of typing, you're going to want to put it down on something, either on a table or on your leg if you're sitting down. Propped up, you can actually get pretty fast typing on it. Includes a bunch of the same apps that you find on the iPhone. They've all been redesigned for the bigger screen, and generally speaking, they look a lot better and work a lot better than they do on an iPhone, particularly because there's less sort of digging into gopher holes where you go down a whole bunch of screens and then you have to come all the way back out of them. A lot of the apps on here have been designed to have a real-world metaphor to them. So, for example, if you're looking in your contacts book, it actually feels a lot like you're looking in a book, and you've got sort of the 2 sides to the book on here. The iCal app on here looks a lot like you're looking in a day planner, and I would actually say that I prefer the iCal app on here than the one on a desktop Mac. Not a huge fan of that application, and I just find that the one on here works a lot better, a lot faster and more responsive. Mail on here is a completely different experience than it is on an iPhone because you've got your messages down one side of the screen in sort of your inbox view, and then you've got the actual mail that you're looking at on the right side of the screen, and the great thing is you can actually scroll them independently. So a lot more useful, a lot more screen real estate, and you can actually open attachments in mail messages in the application that supports them. So if you get, for example, a Pages document and you've got Pages loaded on your iPad, tap on that, it'll pop up and open in the right place. iTunes on here is a great experience because they've done a better job, I think, of taking advantage of the screen space compared to on an iPhone. One thing that's actually missing out of here is cover flow, so if you're a big cover flow user, you're not going to find it on here, but generally speaking, they've done a better job of sort of being able to browse around, I find, than they have done on the iPhone, and even in some cases, better than iTunes on the desktop. Now, one of my favorite apps on here is actually the Photos app, mostly because the screen is so great at displaying photos, and it's just such a rich experience, and to be able to sit down with somebody else and look over photos, let's say you've been on a trip somewhere, and right now your options for showing them your photos are sort of bring your laptop, which kind of sucks, show them on an iPhone, tiny little screen, or bring this along, and you've just got such a rich experience of flipping through those photos. I love the way that you can look at the album view and expand an album with your pinch and zoom motion to kind of get a preview of the photos that are in there, and then switch into that mode, flip through them. You get a little navigation at the bottom to show you where you are. The whole thing is fantastic. Now, of course, there's no camera on here, so you're not going to be taking photos, but loading photos up and being able to look at them is a great experience. There are 4 apps available from Apple in the App Store. One of them is free, that's iBooks, which they've talked about a lot, so that's the one which allows you to buy books and read them on here. The other 3 are the iWork Suite, Keynote, Pages, and Numbers, so that's presentations, document editing, and spreadsheets. iBooks on here is a great experience, maybe not as great as a Kindle, so if you've got a Kindle, you might find that you're not quite ready to ditch that hardware. Reading on here is a backlit LCD versus the Kindle's e-ink. The Kindle is easier on the eyes, but the experience on here is really great. So you launch the iBooks application, you get, your book opens up full screen, comes with a free copy of Winnie the Pooh. There are a whole bunch of other free books also available in the store in here. Reading books is great. There's this beautiful page turn effect that follows your finger as you're turning the page back and forth. So, that experience is great. You can also just tap to turn, so you don't have to do the drag every time across. You can bookmark on individual words, which is nice if you want to come back to a certain point. There's no note-taking ability yet. We might see that in a future version. You can increase font size, do searching, all the sorts of things you would expect when you're reading a book. One of the things that we haven't seen, though, is anything beyond what you would expect when you're reading a book. So no real multimedia in here yet, maybe something that comes in a future version. Apple has said that this supports the EPUB format, so you can load books that don't come out of the store, but again, no really rich multimedia experience yet. Also, no magazines and newspapers in the iBooks app as of now. A whole bunch of magazines are doing their own applications. For the most part, they're kind of a disappointment. It's a lot like reading the print version, except you now have to tap the screen to turn pages. And a lot of them are charging quite a lot for the experience of doing that. So far, magazines on here have been a little bit of a disappointment. I will say, if you're interested in the direction of where that might be going, take a look online for the Wired video of their vision of the future of the iPad. We'll link to it from the show notes on butterscotch.com. So take a look for that video, and you'll see a vision of where magazines could be going that's a lot more interesting than what we've seen on here so far. One app you might want to play with if you kind of want an idea of what that looks like is the Marvel app. You can find it in the App Store. And it just gives you a really nice perspective of being able to browse through a comic on here. I really like how you can put it into sort of one panel full screen mode and tap to kind of move to the next panel. But that motion across the page really feels like a richer experience of looking at a comic book. The iWork apps are sort of covered in a whole bunch of online reviews. We've in fact done a 10-part series on butterscotch.com, so if you want detail on them, you can check them out there. You're not going to replace using your desktop for really long editing, but they're entirely usable if you need to do some quick work or editing. And if you've got sort of the keyboard dock or a Bluetooth keyboard, you might even find that Pages is really useful for longer writing, but you're not going to use the on-screen keyboard for lengthy stuff. On the whole, this is a great first release. I'm really impressed from a 1.0 product. I mean, keeping in mind that, of course, it's preceded by the iPod and a bunch of other things, but I have to say that this device really feels like you're holding the future in your hands. I know that sounds a little cheesy, but there's really something to manipulating objects on the screen directly with your fingers that's just not there when you've got a mouse. And you can do it on an iPod Touch or on an iPhone, but it's different on a screen that's this bright and large and with your whole hand. So, things like the Maps application, when you're getting in there and you're scrolling around on a fast internet connection, it's loading instantaneously, is a very different feeling. And if you're not sure that you're going to like the iPad, I really recommend that you head out to an Apple store and play with one in person before you pass judgment on it. It's really something that has to be experienced firsthand, and I pun intended, to really understand the device. So go to an Apple store, check it out. It's a lot of fun to play with, and it's only going to get better from here. And by the way, if you're looking for an easier way to get a web domain, hover.com has a coupon code for Mr. Mobile fans that will get you 10% off. Use the coupon code that you can see on the screen or in the show notes on butterscotch.com. I'm Jay Goldman. This has been Mr. Mobile on butterscotch.com. Thanks for watching, and we'll catch you next time.
This episode is brought to you by our friends at Hover, the easiest way to buy domain names and do more with them. Get 10% off today by visiting hover.com/MrMobile.